My name is Lucas Gallen. I'm the head of digital forensics for Flamingo, which is a bit of a weird title. We're going to be talking about that. And today we're going to be talking about cell phones and what they do, which I think we know. So Flamingo is really a company that does a lot of services around research. We do semiotics, we do qualitative research, futures, but always in terms of bringing these disciplines together in order to find answers for our clients. Digital forensics really is about the practice of leveraging data and machines, but in the service of human research, right? Rather than just a simple way in which we optimize through machinery, we really try to leverage machines in tandem with traditional research techniques to get more out of them. One of the ways in which we do this is by enhancing the normal qualitative process by doing digital tracking. And that is because traditional qual, as we all know, is extremely useful, but has some issues with the fact that people don't always tell the truth. And actually, there's a lot more to humans than the way which we post-rationalize what we do when we're interviewed, right? As we become more digital, obviously more of our life takes place inside our phones. So what we've done is we've developed a series of research techniques to really extract as much from our cell phones. And through this, we've learned a lot more about what our lives mean through a digital lens. I always do this where I try to give a live demo, which I'm going to try to do now. If it breaks, I'm really sorry, but we got to try this. So one of the things that you can do by extracting from your cell phone is obviously really gain a full understanding of someone's kind of digital persona. So here we have one of our candidates. We can see obviously what app usage they use, what they do in a given day. We can see that this is an unfortunate colleague of mine who I've persuaded to do this for today's show. They've obviously gone out of their way to impress me by going running early in the morning, showing me how healthy they are. We can see, just how our digital patterns change on a given day, right? Like there's, all of this Instagram and Netflix, but here we have a day trip to Brighton or to a coastal city, and we actually don't use the cell phone that much except to take pictures. We can access, obviously, the kind of influences that people have through Instagram or different social media. We can access what kind of internet they're using, right? And all of this in service of telling us more and more about people. For example, here we have some Amazon shopping or some checking for World Cup results, all of that kind of stuff. All of this to say that our cell phones have really changed the way in which we live our lives. You remember your first phone? I'm not sure if my mic is working anymore. But I had a Nokia, and my mom got it for me when I went to high school in Rome, and it was a way for her to keep tabs on me when I went out at night. And it was amazing. When it came out, it did SMS, it did obviously calls, which is the primary thing. My mom would call me at 11, where the hell are you? And then it did Snake. Snake was the essence. And even then, we knew it was a revolutionary technology. But today, our phones do so much more than for us, right? It's a misnomer to call them phones, because actually a lot of what we do with our phones has nothing to do with that original promise of an SMS or a message. Snake sucks now. You're probably better off playing Fortnite, I guess. And in terms of giving us so much more, they demand so much more from us, which is exactly the kind of thing that we can observe. One of the most interesting aspects of this is that relationship. As we get more from our devices, we also yield more of our time. It may seem crazy to say, how could someone spend 6 hours on their phone in a given day, right? But what do we want a phone for? We want to make calls and messages. That's less than 10 minutes a day. That's very reasonable. I get lost a lot. So first I need emails to know what I'm doing. I mean, that's just an extension of messages, right? Then like I say, I get lost a lot, so I need maps. That still pretty normal. And I catch a cab from time to time. Have you guys heard of Uber or Lyft? It's this new thing you can do where you get a car and it takes you somewhere. And come on, I mean, like while we're at it, I might as well have internet. That's fairly reasonable. And I like going on shopping websites. But one of the things I hate about them is how tiny the buttons are. Like my thumb can't quite hit them. So I get a shopping app, which is, again, fairly reasonable. And then I like to play games. So I only play them in the morning or in the evening. It's not that much. And go on, I still have Facebook. So I use a bit of Facebook. And then by the time we've added everything, we're at about 324 minutes of screen time a day, right? The more services we layer on this, the more insidiously it becomes a huge part of our day. That's not to say that all of the time I'm using my phone, I'm conscious, but it's definitely at odds with itself. It's at odds with the promise that technology makes for us. Because really, in the technology space, there is this one narrative that is being pushed. It's this order, right? When you look at these really slick adverts for top technology companies, Alexa's off to the side and you're doing your homework with your son, and it's so effortless. It just enhances you. Like, it's not in any way interfering with you. There's a lot of these sunset pictures being taken, which is amazing. I haven't done that ever. There's a lot of grown men skateboarding, you know, like, again, not something I do, but that's the kind of promise that technology has. And to a large degree, it's delivering on that promise, but at the same time, it's at odds with the chaos it brings. Obviously, we don't need to talk about like the potential dystopian futures that emerge from things like, you know, Black Mirror scenarios of face tracking, the unintended economic consequences, the rise of, you know, fascism again, which this dude with a hoodie, I don't know who he is, but he is terrifying. He's everywhere. If you just search for hacking, seems to be the perpetrator of all of the hacking. This guy, we don't need to talk about who he is, but that's a problem. Obviously, the fact that we are completely subsumed by our technology, and it can be stressful. That one boss on Slack that won't stop messaging you, and needless to say, the fact that sometimes it feels like we are just seeing repeats of our own appetites in these echo chambers, right? So that's the heart of the talk that I wanted to give today, this tension between technology as order and technology as chaos. And they're almost two faces of the way that we live our digital lives. And we can see them kind of playing out through this kind of cell phone tracking that we do. So we're going to look at well-being, communication, and personalization, starting really with well-being. I met someone recently. One of the things we do when we do Qual is obviously we meet people face to face, and there was this person that we were interviewing that said, you know, sleep is a real struggle, but I got an app for that, so it's going to be all right. And this is like a central thing that we see play out, right? Like technology does have this promise, is this panacea that it can bring to all of our ailments. Or you don't sleep, you get a sleeping app. You want to lose weight, you get a calorie app. And we see this all the time in the people that we follow, right? We see people using calorie counter to really, you know, keep tabs on what they eat, mindfulness through things like Headspace, and exercise. You know, Fitbit is really great. So when we looked at our candidate, you know, I was checking out what they were doing, and they were very good. Like every night they were using this Sleep Better app. And I was like, surely this app is working. It must be delivering incredible sleep. But obviously they were also doing other stuff in the night. Not what you think, but they obviously were then going on YouTube and spending till 2 in the morning looking at reruns of Would I Lie to You or Live at the Apollo. And again, it's this way in which we fool ourselves. We think that the app is going to deliver the solution, but we then also use our phone to look at a bunch of video, which is obviously going to stimulate us and keep us awake. Another thing, this one's my favorite. I hear this all the time. We interview people and they're like, I don't really use social media that much. That much is a very loose scale in today's world, right? And that's because as all of these apps compete for our space, we're almost using our phones automatically. Most of our research uses the measured screen time. So we can't see someone's eye looking at the phone. We just see when the phone is actively being used. And what's really interesting about that is the fact that when we confront people, when we talk to them about their behavior, they often can't recall certain things. We use our phones so effortlessly that it's almost automatic. And it's not a surprise. We have a whole ecosystem of things competing for our attention. You know, there are really like kind of 4 kinds of apps. We got the super kings, you know, like which are apps that have high frequency, high usage. Instagram and Snapchat and WeChat are kind of the kings of that. We find them almost on every phone, and they're used huge amounts of time. We have your low frequency by heart usage apps, which is a game you've just downloaded, right? Nobody else has that game, or at least not a lot of people have that game, but you're playing the hell out of it. Or if you're into bike riding and you have Strava, you use it a lot, but we don't find Strava in a lot of users. The reverse of that is obviously apps that we all have on our phones, but that we don't use that often. The clock, the alarm clock, things like WhatsApp, which is used a little bit more frequently, and increasingly Facebook. Facebook has kind of dropped out of that super king app level into kind of being, almost found in every phone, but not necessarily being used that much. And Twitter is also kind of on the decline. And then finally, the middle ground, which is where everybody else is operating, everybody else that's pining for your attention, your eBay, TikTok as it emerges, Pandora Radio, whether you use Spotify. And that's kind of the ecosystem that all of these apps kind of compete in order to maintain your attention. So they each promise something from you, but at the same time, they each demand your attention. So it's very easy to see how we go from someone like me, a terrible son. I use WhatsApp about 1 minute a day to say hello to my mom. And if I was a better son, I would probably use it around 36 minutes per day to use WhatsApp to talk to my mom. But as we start combining apps, it very quickly accelerates. Here we have your classic combination of an Instagram and a Snapchat, already at 127 minutes. And then in some of our youngest tracks, we have things like 240 minutes a day just on Snapchat. So it's very quickly that these things become highly dominant. The third thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about is more topical, is this idea about information and this thing we hear a lot about, fake news and the ability to really trust what you're reading. And indeed, the internet has created a very interesting space in the sense that the kind of range of information you can get is incredible, but also the quality of that information is spottier. In today's world, we do find ourselves in a kind of situation where it's not really clear where what we're reading is coming from, and where we can completely optimize kind of our appetites in service of things. And that's because, obviously, if you try to put the whole internet on your phone and try to consume it, it would be impossible, right? That was the classic problem that the Facebook feed had, where your friend having a baby was competing with an advert from the Washington Post, right? So we created algorithms. It was a very natural and honest thing that we needed to create. So when I go on Amazon, I get recommendations that are pertinent to me. Sadly, mostly video games and comics. Instagram recommends influencers that are appropriate for you. Twitter, again, it's kind of optimized, and you set up your own, plate of things that you're going to be particularly interested in. And then obviously Google. If me and another person search for the word Armageddon, I'm going to get a ton of video games because that's a very popular word in video games. And someone might get something religious or about climate change. The point is that we're not all experiencing the same internet, and that's because experiencing the internet unfettered is impossible. But with the very simple desire to optimize ourselves, to create ways of consuming the internet, we very quickly get into dangerous territory. In an ordinary network, say your group of friends, we encounter people we agree with and people we disagree with. We try to surround ourselves with people who feel like us, but there's always that friend of yours who says something crazy at the pub, and you're like, all right, maybe, we'll talk about that another time. But, or your parents or family members. The point is we interact every day with people who we don't always see eye to eye, and we have to find some way in between. Online, there is a direct measure for whether you liked something or not. You clicked on it, you liked it, you engaged with it, or you didn't. So an optimized network very quickly gets to the heart of the matter by measuring that. It very quickly understands your appetites, right? I tend to buy certain things. I hit that buy button on Amazon, and Amazon knows. So it knows that it shouldn't be trying to sell me a frying pan, because that's not what I'm interested in. But as we optimize that, we quickly get to the idea of a prune network, where as content and attention becomes very compromised, we only leverage the content that we know is sure to get a click. Now, if information is the real, kind of metric, then people create more and more salacious information for us to consume. So, what started out like BuzzFeed's like top 10 reasons why Gryffindor is not as good as, I don't know, I don't read Harry Potter, but very quickly turns into ideas that are very salacious or particularly radical that you might click on just on impulse. And because it registers that click, it constantly optimizes and gives you more of that content. So what starts out as a very innocent desire to optimize what is an unhuman amount of information very quickly becomes a system that only services what you've already done. So the idea of serendipity, or perhaps being introduced to ideas that you might not be okay with, is lessened. And I think we all know the kind of problems that that's starting to have within the discourse in our societies. But that's particularly sensitive because most of the people we talk to tell us that their primary source of information is social media. And social media channels have this problem in spades, which is the idea that they need to optimize for the amount of content that's coming through. So, all of these tensions, this idea of chaos and order, what does it really mean to brands? Well, principally, I need to get paid at some point, so actually I need to leverage this research in a way that we do something interesting and useful for brands. But the main thing that we do that this technology allows us to do is really understand point of purchase. A long time ago, too long perhaps, I started this job and I realized that one of the promises that research really made to brands is that idea that we would find things that would affect that bottom line, someone's desire to purchase something or not. But that idea of seeing that moment play out, the moment of purchase, became elusive, right? It's very difficult to find that very moment when someone bought something and then sort of scan their brain and be like, why did you buy that? This technology allows us to do just this, right? We can completely couple the ideas of desires, opportunities, and appetites that push someone into the space where they're potentially going to buy something, and then track it digitally through the available pathways in order to understand why someone buys something. And that's a very, very exciting moment because as we play back, we look through all of the influences and all of the ecosystems that took part in driving that purchase in order to understand what is actually an area where you can intercept that and change someone's mind. And then finally, just to leave you with a thought, obviously, I'm not a futurologist. I don't really know what's going to happen in the future, but it's not really a surprise to see that our world is changing faster than we can digest. One of the potential things that's happening is that as our cell phones become more of our lives, the device itself becomes meaningless. It's not a surprise to see, tech brands homogenizing their ecosystems around all of their laptops, all of their devices, all of the music services they provide, economic services, car services, and the Internet of Things. As your washing machine is connected to your lights, that's connected to your phone, that might all come under an umbrella. And what that really leads us with is a world which we've never seen before, where companies actually have an influence on people that we've never experienced before. And perhaps that's why we are seeing this backlash against social media today about the responsibility they have when playing out in a democratic process. But the point is that I think that our future does look very interesting from a technological perspective, but we need to be aware of kind of how much these ecosystems are a part of our lives. And perhaps when we call our phone just a phone, realize that it's so much more these days. And that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much.